Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SCORE Fairfield County's live webinar on 7 biggest mistakes made by small business owners when trying to grow. I'm Bob Hogan, the webinar coordinator and a business mentor here at SCORE Fairfield County, and I'm going to be your host today. Our presenter today is Belinda Wasser, and more about Belinda in just a moment, but first a few words about SCORE. SCORE is a national organization with over 320 chapters and 11,000 volunteers across the country. Locally here in SCORE Fairfield County, we have over 130 volunteers with a wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. And we offer 3 primary value-added services to small business owners. We offer one-on-one counseling that can either be face-to-face, telephone, email, or by Skype. We offer a wide range of educational workshops and webinars like we're doing today, actually over 150 during the year. And thirdly, we offer extensive resources on our website, including access to a network of subject experts in various disciplines. Our next webinar will be 2 weeks from today on June 19th when Raquel Virgo will present Grant Writing 101, Back to Basics. And you can find more specifics on that at our website at fairfieldcounty.score.org. A little bit of information about today's event. We have set aside time for some Q&A at the end of Belinda's presentation. But you can submit questions at any time during the presentation, and Belinda may take them as we go. Please use the chat window in the lower left-hand side of your screen, and we will be able to see your questions there. We will end our webinar sharply at 1 o'clock to respect your time. The webinar is being recorded, and the access to the recording will be available in a couple of days, and you'll be able to not only listen to the recording, but you'll be able to see the materials that Belinda is presenting. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Belinda Wasser is a business workflow and logistics expert with 25 years of experience. Belinda is the founder of Rocket Girl Solutions, who's hired by many small businesses on a contract basis to act as their part-time business manager. She has also worked with a range of high-profile companies, including Digitas, EDS, and the Center of Quality Management. I'll now turn it over to Belinda. Belinda, all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here today at SCORE. I have a long, wonderful relationship with SCORE. My first counselor I met 16 years ago, and so I'm grateful to be here today. First, what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about myself, and then we'll jump right into the mistakes. So I had a great career, 17 years in corporate America. I have lots of amazing managers and terrific projects and a lot of fun. I focus mostly on the back-end stuff that makes a company run, so operations and IT. But in 2001, when my daughter was born, I decided I wanted to go off on my own. So since I was knee-deep in baby stuff and I love technology, I decided to start an online baby store. It was called Blueberry Babies. And I have to say that as soon as my business launched, I realized that all of the things that helped me to be successful in corporate America, none of them translated over to having a small business. So all of a sudden, I needed to know things about credit card processing, website design, how to build an email list, how to send a newsletter, how to market my business, how to do all of these things that were handled for me when I was in corporate. And so you have to remember, too, that this was in the dark ages of the Internet. I would go to Java in New York to buy product, and the vendors there didn't want to sell to me because they were afraid that that the brick-and-mortar stores, we don't even hear that phrase anymore, the brick-and-mortar stores weren't going to buy from them if they started to sell online. So simple things like sending out tracking numbers to customers for when their product was going to arrive all had to be done manually. But because I really enjoyed doing this kind of work, eventually I figured it out, and people started to notice. And they would contact me, and I would say, come to my neighborhood, buy me a martini, and I'll sit down with you, and I'll try to get you to the next place in your business. And I loved doing it. I really looked forward to it. So one day someone said, would you mind doing it for me? And I was ready for a change, and so I said yes. And that's when I started to be Rocket Girl. So what I do now is I work with solo professionals, people on their own, like financial planners and coaches and marketing people. And what I do is I act as their part-time business manager. So I help them with all the back-end pieces of their business. And you can imagine over time, since I've probably, been in about 150 or so businesses, I see a lot of things that, a lot of mistakes that small businesses make. And so today I'd like to help you learn how to avoid them. Okay, so let's jump in right here with mistake number 1. There are elements that say, I'm in business for real. But unfortunately, I come across a lot of small businesses that do things that make them look like they're not. So let's take a look at a couple of them. Okay. Oh, the other thing is after each mistake, I'm going to ask if there's any questions. So please, if you have questions along the way, put them in the chat box. I'd love to be able to answer them in the moment if you have them. All right. So here what we have is the beginning of an email. And what you see here is my email address. Now you notice that my email address is belinda@rocketgirlsolutions.com. It's not rocketgirlsolutions@gmail.com. So a lot of times it's interesting because small business owners already own their domain. They have a website. They might use that domain all over the place, but they're not actually using it in their email address. Most of the time, these email addresses are actually free, and you can get help setting them up. If you decide to use a paid service, usually it's only about $5 a month, but it really steps you up a level in terms of professionalism. The second thing is to have an email signature, and here you see every time I send an email, I've got my logo, I have my name, my tagline, which tells people what I do, but a really important thing that a lot of people leave off is their phone number. And I can't tell you how many times I've been getting ready for a meeting, and I'm looking for the person's phone number, and I can't find it. So please put the email address, the phone number in your email signature. It really makes a difference. The next thing is a professionally designed business card. A lot of people think you can just upload your logo on Vistaprint, get the free cards, but it really is a tip that you're not being as professional as you should. So these cards here are from Moo. They don't have to be expensive. These, for example, you can order 50 cards for $19. So if you're just starting out and you don't have a lot of money and you're not sure, that's a great way to get a very professionally done card. Now these were designed by a graphic artist, which I recommend. And the great thing is that the card that I still use today, although the address has changed, everything else is the same. And so that investment has lasted almost 8 years. So be sure to do that. Next is LinkedIn. Everybody needs a LinkedIn profile if you're in business. There's really no getting around that. So this is my little brother, Tim, who I want to point out some things that are not so great about his profile. I fixed it, though, and he knows I'm doing this, so it's okay. So the first thing is, I think you can't see it on the screen, but his picture is really small. There's actually a gray box around his image showing how big the picture could be, but he hasn't taken advantage of that. The other thing is you can see there's a blonde woman right here and a bald guy back there, and his chin is cut off, which is really not working in his favor. Now, I have identical twin brothers, so this is my brother Tom. So he's gone for the power shot, right, which is great. And then here's my profile. And some of the things that I'd like to show you here is, so I had this headshot made at a place called Portrait Simple. I had it done in Boston. There's one in Danbury. Very affordable. I use this everywhere. LinkedIn, Facebook, on my website, in my newsletter. So invest in that. It's less than $100 for a headshot. The other things I want to point out are, so my brothers here, they have these big fancy jobs. And so their title, it's not as important because they have jobs. They don't really need to let people know what they're doing. Us, on the other hand, we need to let people know what we're doing. So my actual title, because I thought it would be fun, is Chief Rocket Launcher. But what I put instead is what I do. So business manager for solo professionals and small business owners. So while Chief Rocket Launcher might be funny, I really want to attract people who want to work with me. Other things to do that are important, make sure your contact information is clear, phone number, website address, email address. Even if it's redundant, you don't want people to have to work. Work on building your network, so try to get up to 500 connections. It takes time, and it was a project for me for a while. It took me a couple of years, but it was well worth it. And then the last thing I want you to notice here is on LinkedIn you can have your own URL. And see, mine here is / Belinda Wasser. I don't recommend using your business address because that might change as you move, if you have successful business after a successful business. So I would make it your name. Okay? All right, so the next thing is a website. We also, if we're in business, we need a nicely done website. Now here is a website that I did with my team for Martha Miser from Enduro Consulting. And what I want to do, I want you to just see with the whole thing together. It's too small to read, but now I'm going to break it down into pieces so I can point out some elements that you want to make sure to have in your website. First of all, her logo. It's beautifully done. It was done by a professional. It didn't cost a fortune. And then you can see here, and it's also clear. You go to a lot of websites and the logos are pixelated, they're fuzzy. This is really a place where you want to shine. Then she has a tagline, Leadership and Change for Purpose-Driven Companies. So some way of giving a hint to everyone about what you're doing. Another element here is her social media. A lot of times people have websites and they'll have LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. They'll have all of these different icons, but when you go to visit, there's actually no good information there. So Martha only spends time on LinkedIn, so that's what she's showing. So only use the social media icons that you're actually participating in. And the last thing is if you have content on your website that people might want to search for, make sure you have a search box. It's simple, but it's important. Another thing Martha has on her website is we have this great picture of her actually in action, so it brings a personal touch. And then the second thing here is you'll notice her description of what she does. She does a pretty complicated job, but what she's done is she's boiled it down. And a lot of websites have too much information. People can't read it. It's too overwhelming. So really keep it short. Another great thing to have is a testimonial. So here you can see right away people are reading how fabulous she is, what she does, and then here you can see that there are more testimonials on a page all on their own. Any chance you have to let yourself shine, you have to grab it. In the footer, there are 3 important things about Martha's business. The footer might be different for different businesses, but for hers, she's got Contact Us. So even though there's a Contact Us tab on her website, make it easy for people. The other thing is she wants people to subscribe to her newsletter, so it's front and center. And then the third thing, she wants to give people a clue about what she does. So right here you can see learn more about what we do, and then right here is a place to click, and you can go to her services page. So when your website, your LinkedIn profile, your business cards, everything you put out into the world look terrific, you're doing a great job. So take a peek at all of those things in your business. So the second mistake is not keeping in touch with the people that you know. Let's start with a story. I had a neighbor named Alexa, and she started a business many years ago, and her business is really unique. She helps physicians be better observers by looking at art. So very small niche. So I helped her set up her newsletter, and then I ran into her, I don't know, a couple of years later, and it occurred to me that I hadn't gotten her newsletter in a long time. And I said, Alexa, are you still publishing? And she said, oh, yes, I'm publishing. And I said, well, how come I never get it? And she was a little embarrassed, and she said, well, I took you off my list. And I said, well, why did you do that? And she said, because I didn't think you could refer anyone to me. And so this is a huge mistake, because what Alexa didn't know was that a couple times a year I would stand next to the CEO of this big hospital in Boston and watch our daughters play sports. Now, I'm not sure I would have brought it up to him and said, hey, my neighbor, teaches physicians, but if he would ever have brought it up, I would have absolutely introduced them. So we want to make sure that we're staying in touch with people because they can refer you. A lot of people talk about their prospecting, and they're working hard to network, and they want to know, should they cold call, or how are the ways that they can get new customers and clients. But what I really think is important is to keep in touch with the people that you know, keep in touch with the people that you know. And now let me show you how I do that. So the first criteria is that I only keep in touch with people that I like. All right, so the fastest way for me to do that is I write a newsletter. My newsletter is called Rocket Fuel. It's practical things small business owners need to know to run their businesses better. And this is sort of the overall here. And now I want to show you the important pieces. So the first is, again, I use my graphic artist, and he designed a header. There's a tagline so people know what I'm going to talk about. And here is a welcome for me. So the idea of this is to establish myself as an expert and to be likable, so people are interested in getting to know me and work with me. And here again is my picture, so they know what I look like. The next section is an article that I wrote about something I saw at a horse show that reminded me of business, and I purchased this image for only $2 at on a photography site, but it makes a huge difference. Then the next section on my newsletter is something called Things I Can't Live Without. And the reason that I do this is because I want people to have an insight into who I am. Sometimes I write about technology. Sometimes I write about a kitchen gadget. It's different every time, but I always get a lot of comments on that, and it's a way for people to connect with me. The last part of my newsletter is a short couple of sentences about me, what I do, so that at the end of every newsletter, people are completely clear. So the thing that's important about your newsletter, too, is that it's not something that just gets written and sent in the same day. It's something that takes time. It takes me a couple of hours to write it. I've had practice. I've been doing it for almost 8 years. In the beginning, it used to take me a day. So if you're trying to do a newsletter and it's overwhelming, just remember that it's going to get easier. But you also need help. So I write it. Then I send it to someone who helps make sure that it's understandable, because sometimes I write about technical things. And then the last step is I send it to my editor to make sure that my periods and commas are all in the right place and I'm using words correctly, because I'm sending this out into the world, and it's going to be out there for a while, and it's important that it be professional. Once I write my newsletter, because it takes such an effort, I make sure that I use the content as much as possible. So I post it on my WordPress website. I put a link to the website page on Facebook. I put it on LinkedIn as an article, and then I use it on Twitter. So if you take the time to write a newsletter, really make sure you get as much mileage out of it as you can. All right, the next way that I keep in touch with people is called the Keep in Touch email, and it's really simple. The whole idea of keeping in touch is to be authentic and not to try to sell. So you can see here, this is something that I might have sent out last week. It's personal. I mentioned my business, but that's because I love my business, and it would be natural for me to say it's busy and I'm working on some exciting things. I invite her to give me an update, and some people, depending on where we live and how much I like them, I might invite them to lunch. And if you do a couple of these a day, you can really start to build your business. This was another way that I built my business pretty quickly. The key here is if someone doesn't answer you, don't take it personally. Just keep moving, and try to do it in a systematic way. Work your way through your CRM, where you keep your contacts, or an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. Another way is, this is LinkedIn, and what I call this is linking out. So often people will put their accomplishments on LinkedIn, which is great. That's a really good use of it. in this case, this is my client Bob, and he published this article. And so if you'll see right here is my picture, and I wrote, "Thanks for another great article, Bob," and I post it. So he sees this, he feels great, I'm sharing the love, spreading the word, but I'm also keeping in touch with him in this way. And one year, it was about 5 years ago, there was a man who was my ex-husband's friend that I didn't know very well, and he posted that he was starting a new business on LinkedIn, and I wrote what I would have said to him in person. I wrote, "Congratulations, Mark." And literally within a half an hour, my phone rang, and he hired me to help him start his business, and that year he paid me $15,000. So you really never know where work is going to come from. So that's one of the reasons I call it sprinkling. I'm just sprinkling myself everywhere that I can. So here's an area that's often forgotten, keeping in touch with your current clients. So what I do is every Monday morning, well, let me back up. So how I work with my clients is they prepay my time. So I have this thing I call the Rocket Girl debit card. You can see a picture of it. It's just a virtual pretend thing, but it's an easy way for me to talk about working together. So people can buy 10 hours or 5 hours of my time, and I track it. But every Monday morning, I send this email out to my 50 clients, and I tell them how much time they have left so there's no surprises and they can plan. I give them the opportunity to buy either 10 or 5 more hours, and then here I offer them the opportunity to get on my calendar. I have a calendar software on my website. So here's a way where I'm trying to offer for them, here's where our relationship stands, and here's how we can move forward. And this has been terrific, and it's kind of fun because on Mondays I send this out, and lots of people renew their debit cards, and so it's a great way to start the week. Okay. This right here, so I have a lot of latitude in my business because I really play up the whole Rocket Girl thing, and it's a lot of fun. So this is the handwritten note. This is another secret weapon. So here I have, again, my guy Mark Tatro, my graphics guy. He created this card. You've got my URL there, but there's not a lot of sales stuff on it. And this is my client Robin was having kind of a rough week, and so I just sent her this note. It's not complicated, just wanted to give your day a little lift off, kind of fun, and I sent this. This is a picture that she posted on Facebook. So now all of a sudden tons of people are seeing it, and it's great. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of Send Out Cards, but Send Out Cards is a service. It's an online service where they send physical cards in the mail. They have lots of cards already designed, but you can design your own. So again, my secret weapon, Mark, I had him design this cover for the card here, and it's supposed to be a little funny. So it's operational optimization, idea of the month. And what I do in here to have fun is I torture my boyfriend, and he has to take pictures of me doing things like, at the Grand Canyon or in the shoe store doing something silly. And then what I do is I put a tip that relates to the image, and it's a nice way to stay in touch. And usually I send that to about 60 people a month, and those are people who are my clients or people I really like. But everyone gets all of these things. So the newsletter people might just get the newsletter, but the people who get the cards and the handwritten notes and the stay in touch, they all get the newsletter too. So this is true, right? Out of sight, out of mind. So stay in touch with the people that you know and the people that you like. Okay, so picture this. You want to have a webinar. You would like to send an invitation to a party, announce your new website, your new business, or maybe you're just thinking about sending a holiday card. But where are your contacts, right? They're all over the place. So what you'll want to do is get them into Excel. But your contacts are really the fuel of your business. It's hard to get the word out or share anything if they're not in one place. This is not an easy job, and it's usually for most people it's not fun, but I really encourage you to look through your Mac Mail, your LinkedIn, Outlook, everywhere your contacts are. Go through your those stacks of business cards, and this is the test that I have, because we all have those old business cards. If in a couple of words the person would be tipped off to remember who you are, that's who I add. So for example, if I have a business card of someone and I remember, oh yeah, that's a mom I met at ballet while I was waiting for my daughter. If I said ballet mom, we would be off to the races. So that guy that I met at the Microsoft conference 12 years ago, don't add him to your contacts. It's not going to add any value, and he's not going to know who you are. But do add as many people as you really know. It's really important. All right, so here's how I want you to get them into Excel. You want to separate the different types of information by field. So here's at the simplest: first name, right? Last name, and email address. You really only need the email address. If you have the other information, that's great too. And if you want to add street address, city, state, zip, have a separate column for each one of those. To do this, you don't need to know Excel. You just need to know how to type. Make sure you save it a lot so that if you add 5 columns, just hit Control-S or save it so that you can preserve your data. So once you have that, now all of a sudden you can do so many things. You can start a newsletter in Constant Contact or MailChimp or Aweber. You can do marketing automation with Infusionsoft. You can put them into all kinds of CRMs to keep in touch. These are some of the popular ones. You can use Evite to invite people to a party, or you can use Eventbrite and invite people to an event, a webinar, things like that. So these are lots of tools, but they all require that you have email addresses all in one place.
Belinda, we have a question from Bruce Paul, and it's regarding what do you recommend beyond Excel for CRM and marketing, for example, Salesforce or HubSpot? Do you have any comments on anything like that?
I do. That's a really good question. If your business is really small and you're not in corporate, I do not recommend Salesforce or HubSpot or Infusionsoft. So let me talk a little bit more about that. Infusionsoft is good if you need a shopping cart and you're going to sell to a lot of people and you need to track their behavior. So, for example, if you're going to have a webinar and you want to send a series of emails before the webinar once they sign up and a series of emails afterward, Infusionsoft is great, especially if you want to use the shopping cart. It is expensive though. For the shopping cart, I think it's $250 a month, and there are other very affordable tools that you can use. I'll throw a couple names out. You might not know them, but you can jot them down. So if you want to sell on, say, your WordPress website, if you use Gravity Forms and you use MailChimp, you can pretty much get the same thing going without really spending anything. Gravity Forms is free if you have a developer's license, and MailChimp is free under $2,000. But I find that, especially HubSpot and Salesforce, it's like the tool is just way too big for the job, and I think people get lost in it. And although I use Infusionsoft all the time, it's actually nicknamed Confusionsoft, and it took me years to learn it, and it was a little painful. So what I use is Contactually. Contactually has been around for about 7 years. They're now focusing on the real estate market because there's the big referral marketplace. I don't use those components, and some people are now put off by that. But it is a really great CRM. And most of these, if not all of them, now link with email. So what happens is I send an email. This is what's so great. I can be in my car sending an email on my phone, and by the time I get in the house, the email and the record of that is in Contactually. So the contact is brought over, so now all I need to do is tag them or bucket them in a way that I want to keep track of them. I have a couple of people who completely live by PROSPERWORKS and Nutshell. I've had a demo of both of them. I haven't personally used them. They're less expensive than Contactually, and I would start there if I were starting out, either in PROSPERWORKS or Nutshell.
Great, thank you. I think that's well described, and there's just so many choices out there. So there are probably 50 CRMs. The main thing with any tool is make sure you like it. If you don't like it or it's uncomfortable, and that's what happened with me with Salesforce. I tried it, and it just felt too overwhelming, and it wasn't offering anything that I couldn't get somewhere else in a more simple way. Okay, so we'll move on to mistake number 4. So this is an easy mistake to make because nobody really likes to look at this, right? Nobody likes to look at that. But I'm going to tell you a story about one of my clients. She was also
in Boston, and her name is Mary, and she owned an interior landscaping company. So she was the one that went in with the cranes and all the big equipment and put the Christmas trees in the mall and hung the big wreaths on top of the giant, buildings and put the plants in the doctor's offices. And she had a $1 million plus business, very successful. And I went in to help her with a new website and to start a newsletter. And we got to talking one day, and she was complaining about how much money it seemed was sort of slipping through her fingers. And I said, well, why don't you, so she had a business manager named Sally who was her close friend. And I said, well, when you meet with Sally next time, why don't you, to go over the bank reconciliation, why don't you look more closely at the expenses and talk about different options you have for saving some money? And she said, what do you mean bank reconciliation? And I said, when you sit down and you look at the numbers every month of what your business is doing. And she said, we don't really do that. Sally just handles that. And so Sally wasn't there that day, so I said, well, let's just go in her office. I'm sure, like all good business managers, there's a drawer right next to, in her desk, and all the months are going to be there, and we're going to pull them out, and let's just scan and see what I can help you find out. Well, it turned out there were no bank reconciliations, and there were no bank statements anywhere. And what we learned was that Sally was embezzling from Mary and over the course of a few years. And so even though Sally was the bad guy, Mary wasn't taking care of her stuff. And so part of this lands on Mary, and we really want to take charge of our finances. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but it's important to print out your bank statement every single month and run your finger down the lines of your credit card statements, your bank statements, and know what every single thing means. I had a charge on my card for a long time, and it said Amazon, and I thought it was some subscription that I had for Amazon. It turned out to be something completely different, and before I figured it out, I wasted probably $120. So you really don't want to do that. There's also a trap because we're on our phones, and we can scroll our thumb up and down on our phones in our bank accounts that we think we know what's going on. But I think we don't, and I think things can get bias, and so it's important to sit down once a month and really look at that. And also at tax time, look at where your money is going. The other thing a lot of small business owners don't know is how much they know how much they make, but they don't necessarily know how much they spend, and they don't know how much it costs to run their business every month. So that's a very important number to know. So take the time. There's people who can help you with this. There's lots of money coaches, and it's important. The other thing is you want to make sure that you're looking at your contracts, because it's good to call your cell phone carrier, once a year, just like we call the cable company, right? It's the same thing. Look at your contracts. Make sure you're getting the best prices. I noticed I was buying a tool for one of my clients, and I noticed that it was $56 a month, and I thought, I'm paying $99 a month. And I called them, and they switched it. So that's not insignificant to a small business owner, $40 a month for a tool. So really take some time and know where your money's going. Okay. So this is a big one. Tools are the thing that make me efficient, and they're the reason that I can make as much money as I do. You really need to look around your environment and make sure you have what you need. So, for example, I have a really great desk. It was not expensive. It's an IKEA dining room table, and the reason I picked that is because it's really deep. It fits right into the little slot in the side of the room where I work. It's a dedicated space. People don't walk through it to get to someplace else, and I can really concentrate. My chair, I've had it for 8 years. It was crazy expensive. It's a Herman Miller Aeron chair, but I sit in it all day, every day, and it doesn't look worn out even after all these years. If you have tools that you need, like Scotch tape, scissors, glue, whatever it is, don't keep them in the kitchen. Go to Staples, get all of the supplies that you need, and keep them right in your arms, in your arm's reach. Make sure you have the equipment that you need. It's critical. I have 3 screens, and I didn't have them at first. I had one, but now my work has gotten a little bit more complex, so I have 3 screens. I have the greatest mouse. I have a keyboard that's quiet so people can't hear me typing when I'm talking to them. It's important to do that. So now I'm going to show you some of the tools that I use. And here again, if you have questions about any specific tool, I'm happy to answer them. So I track my time. Oh, also, these are all tools online and in the cloud. So I can literally bring my laptop anywhere, even while I'm driving. Not me, actually, while I'm being driven. And I can work online. So Toggle is how I track my time. And Constant Contact is what I use for my newsletter. I am going to be switching to MailChimp. I think it's a better tool, but for right now, this is where I am. Dropbox, probably most of you have heard of Dropbox. It's a great way to share files with people all over the world, really. Without and it's nice because it's like having a file server in the old days, where you can see all those files together. Contactually, as I mentioned, is my CRM. Microsoft Office is important even for Mac users. I know that sometimes people use pages and numbers when they have a Mac, but it makes it difficult to share that information. So if you're sharing the information with anyone else, please invest in that. You can get it very affordably. I think it's $129 for the pared down version, which is all you need. LastPass is a password management software. So you can imagine I have 50 clients. I probably have, I don't even know, at least 5 or 10 passwords for some. I have 20 plus. So this is a way that I can keep them safe and that I can also share them. So for example, if I'm working on a website for a client, I can share the password with a developer without him being able to
I'm on the
see it,
phone.
and also without him being able to change it. If our relationship stops for some reason, I can cut him off in a click. So it's a really good way to manage passwords in a secure way. There's a paid version and a free version. I use the paid version, which is, I think, $10 a year. It's a little bit more extra encrypted. So that for me is worth it because I'm managing other people's passwords. G Suite, they keep changing what it's called, the Google for Business G Suite. It's essentially Gmail, only it's paid. So what that means is you can use your own domain, rocketgirlsolutions.com or whatever it is in your case, and you get tech support, which is really good. And I never thought you could call Google and get help, but they're terrific. They'll even help you set it up. It's $5 a month, and it's really worth it. Teamwork is how I manage my projects. I'm going to show you a screenshot from that in a bit, but that's a really good tool. I'm going to tell you some other project management software also in an upcoming mistake. Let's see. Stripe. So I accept credit cards. There's a couple of different ways to do that. PayPal works also. Square is another way. Stripe works best for my business. All of those have competitive rates, so you don't really need to worry about that. But Stripe is the one that I really enjoy now. I have a Mac computer. I primarily work on a PC. I find that the applications that I need to use work better on a PC. But make sure you have a brand that you can trust. The vendor that I use for my PCs is Micro Center. I used to use them in Boston, but now that I've relocated, there's a store in Yonkers. Their private brand is terrific. I really like it a lot. And then the last thing is Pandora, which is a music service. And the reason that I have that up is because I listen to music all day long, and it keeps me relaxed and it keeps me able to sit in my seat. So I consider that a tool as well. So make sure that you're really looking around and having your environment be as comfortable as you can and have all the tools that you need.
Linda, there's you may get to this, but there's a question on accounting software. Do you have any recommendations there in terms of accounting software that you'd like?
I do. So QuickBooks is great. It's great for businesses that are really small. It's also great for really multi-million-dollar companies. It has a lot of breadth. So that is good. If you're evaluating QuickBooks, the online version is not the same as the version on your hard drive. And last time I checked, you can't switch back and forth. So if you prefer online, go that way. If you prefer the desktop, then you can do that. The software that I use, I should actually add it to my tools page, is it's called Xero, Xero. And the reason I like it, the first thing is it's not inexpensive. It's $35 a month. But what I can do with it that I really like is I can automate my invoicing system. So when someone goes to my website and they buy a debit card, I use something called Zapier, which is this super cool software that in the cloud that can connect different softwares together. So what happens is when someone goes to my website and they buy the debit card, they go through my credit card processor Stripe, then a little Zapier comes in and it connects to Xero and it creates an invoice. So I've eliminated any paperwork for myself. So then when I reconcile, which we're all going to do, right, my bank account, I just, in accounting terms, receive against that invoice. So that's why I like Xero. It's really simple to use, and it's also great because it is in the cloud, and you can get help remotely. The guy that helps me with mine when I have questions is in Utah. So that's what I recommend. Okay. All right. So I love this picture. And it's really just because you can doesn't mean you should. So one of the things about small business owners is they're usually pretty smart and really capable, and they like to do stuff themselves. The problem is that can really get in the way of getting the right things done. So it's important to look at your business and figure out what are the things that you can delegate. A lot of times I'll hear someone say, I tried to work with a virtual assistant, I tried to work with a bookkeeper, my graphics guy couldn't get it right, whatever, fill in the blank. And then my first question is, and then what they say is, so now I just do it all myself. And they're working millions of hours, they don't see their family, and in some cases they're not making as much money as they could because they're not doing the right things. So my questions are for the people who have tried this, how did you track the work that you gave the bookkeeper, graphic artist, fill in the blank? How often did you communicate with them? And did you set deadlines and expectations? Or did you just say, hey, can you handle this? The other thing is making sure you're hiring the right people. A virtual assistant is not an assistant who can work virtually. A virtual assistant is someone who has a specific set of skills, just like a bookkeeper or an accountant. And so it's important to get the right person for the job. I've had a client hire a friend of hers, and she said, she's a lawyer, she's really smart, but she doesn't know how to import contacts into MailChimp. So that's really not that useful. So make sure that you're hiring the right people. Then you want to make sure that you're delegating responsibly. So here I'm going to talk about project management for a minute. So when I first started my business, I used notebooks. I had 6 clients. I had 6 notebooks. I got them from Staples. I was all set. Then it got a little bit more complicated, and I started using Asana, which is essentially it's a free tool, and it has checklists. So you have checklists, and you can delegate to other people, and they can see it, and they get an email. But it started to be a little bit too simple. So then, it couldn't hold as much data as I needed to, if that's more accurate. So I moved to Basecamp, and while it worked, there were some features that I really didn't like, and I just didn't like how it felt. I tend to be more of an Excel girl, and so this really fits the need for me, teamwork, and I'm going to show you a screenshot in a second. And then some people really like Trello. Trello is a lot like Pinterest, which doesn't fit with my personality, but a lot of people who are creative and entrepreneurs love that, so I would invite you to look at that if you're looking for project management. One of the things, so this is a screenshot from Teamwork. One of the things about project management and running a small business that's very important is to make sure you automate or systematize the things that you do over and over and over, so you're not wasting your creativity trying to remember stuff that you don't need to. So here's an example of what happens when I get a new debit card client. And you can see by looking at this that each step is a discrete individual step that can be checked off. We could have a task in Teamwork that says onboard new client, but then all of a sudden I have to remember what that is. So here you can see Rachel's going to send a welcome email to the client. She's not going to make it up today. There's an email already written with my digital signature and exactly what I want to say, and she sends it out every single time we get a new client, hopefully within 2 hours of them buying their debit card. Then the next day, she sends them my W-9. I didn't do all of these things in the beginning. I had to get hit over the head a couple of times where I noticed, oh, it's the end of the year, everyone's asking for my W-9. Why do I make them ask for it? Why don't I just send it to them? If you see this word right here, it says more. If we were able to click that down, what we would see is the text of the email that Rachel sends. It's not different every time, and it's also because I like there to be certain language associated with my business. So I'm not a big fan of no problem. I prefer it's my pleasure. So in that way, I was teaching Rachel how I want to talk to my clients, and I'm giving her exactly what she needs. And you can see it just goes all the way down. So by the time that this is all finished, which is usually 24 hours after someone buys a debit card, when I sit down at my desk to work, I have everything I need. They've been added. I send a referral gift. It's the same thing every time. I send, I'm sorry, that's actually a rocket pen. I send that a little rocket to my clients. It's a pen. They love it. So again, keeping it fun. The referral gift, sometimes there's not a referral gift, but by having this here, it prompts Rachel to say, if I don't check it off, is there a referral gift? And again, we know exactly what we send out. It's an email. It goes. My credit card's charged. So that's the kind of delegation that's required when you're working with someone. And you might say, well, this is a lot of work. I don't have time for this. And it was work in the beginning, but now when there's a new client, I literally click a couple buttons, forward her an email, and it just gets done. And bringing on 2 or 3 new clients a month, it really saves time. Now, the second piece to this is to remember you're in a relationship. This isn't like you're the boss and you're telling people what to do. It's all about working together, being respectful, and remembering you're in a relationship. So it's not telling someone to do. It's saying, do you have time to do this? Can you do this in the amount of time that I need it to be done? Because if we just fling it over the bow, which is how I think of it, if they can't do it, they're going to try. They're going to want to please you, but it's just not going to work. So it's important that you have a relationship. In the beginning of my relationship with Rachel, I talked to her twice a week for 15 minutes. I showed her my systems. I showed her how things worked, and I got to know her. I got to know her kids' names. I got to know that she's a marathon runner. I wouldn't say that we're friends now 2 years later, but we're colleagues. And so now we only talk once a month because the systems are so tight that we don't need to. And when we talk, we don't usually talk about work. We just catch up with each other and work on our relationship. So delegating is possible. You don't have to do it all yourself. But keep in mind, you're in charge of your business. Even when you delegate, it's up to you to keep track of what's going on. Okay, so I love this graphic. If you don't know already, I love my graphics guy. He did this for me. Okay. So we just talked about delegating, but you also have to be in charge of the things that are important. So, for example, when we went and looked at Mary's business after we found out that Sally had been in the books, we discovered that Mary had administrative rights to QuickBooks, but she was not the administrator. That was a problem. There have been times when people have launched websites and they don't know who's hosting their domain. They don't know who's hosting their website. They don't have the passwords. Their website guy, who they now no longer know where he lives, has that information. And it can be really very difficult to recover that. So as you delegate, remember, if you start a website and someone builds it for you, know how to get in it. You don't need to know how to update it, but you need to know where it's hosted. You need to know, what it is what's the platform? Is it on WordPress? If you run payroll, you don't need to know how to run the payroll, but it would be really helpful if you knew that you talked to Cindy at Advantage Payroll. So a lot of my clients will create books with this information. Books, that's an old-fashioned word. We'll create a Word document, sort of an operating manual, and we'll keep it in their Dropbox folder, and then we can both access it. And it's a way to really take care of your business. So I highly recommend doing that, keeping track of all those important details. So these are the 7 things that we talked about. And I could talk about them for hours. So why don't we open it up for questions? I do want to say one more thing quickly, and that is this is where you can find me. I have two things that I'd like to offer you. One is if you'd like to get my newsletter, I'd love to have you as a subscriber. You can go to my website at Rocket Girl Solutions, and in the lower left-hand corner, you can subscribe. And then the other thing is I love to talk to small business owners. So on the right-hand side of my website, there's a place where you can sign up for a 30-minute consultation. And it's really just me trying to talk to you about helping you with your business and getting you to that next place. So please feel free to take advantage of that. I'd love to talk to you.
Great. Belinda, thank you very much. And we now have, we'll use the remaining time for questions and answers. Again, a reminder, you can submit your questions in the lower left-hand side of your screen there using the chat feature. We'll take as many as we can in the time remaining. And our first question is on your assistant, Rachel. And is Rachel a part-time contractor? And related to that, do you recommend part-time contractor assistants?
Yes, she's part-time. She lives in California. We've never met, and I do. Part-time, yes and no. So one of the things when I picked my virtual assistant and my graphics artist and my web guy is that this needs to be a full-time job for me, for them, because I need them to be available when I'm available. Sometimes I'll send her a message and she'll say, oh, I'm at the Christmas pageant. That's no problem. But I want her intention to be working every day and checking in on my stuff every day. So it depends. If you have a project work and someone's working on it part-time to a deadline, I think that's totally fine. But my people, it's very fluid, and we work really quickly, so I need them to be at their desk and responsive within a couple hours.
That's great. We have another question from Wayne Thompson, and it's what do you think of Insightly for CRM?
One of my clients uses Insightly, and I have been inside it. I'm not an expert at it. I do know it syncs with Google. She loves it, and so I would say it's probably as good as all the rest of them. I'm sorry I don't have really specific information about it, but I do know Kate loves it, and she has a team of 15 people, and they all use it. And I think it's affordably priced as well.
Great. Thanks very much. Another question here. What is a good source for virtual assistants, and how about using Elance? Do you have any familiarity with that?
A good source. It's hard to find good virtual assistants. I'm not going to kid you. The way that I did it was I put an ad on Craigslist, and I instantly had 60 people responding. And a lot of people want to go into the field, but to the point of a virtual assistant is not an assistant that's virtual. I really ran up against that. So what I did was I placed the ad on Craigslist, and if whoever's asking this wants to email me, I'll send you a copy of the ad, but it was very specific about what I needed. And then I asked them a question. I don't remember what it was, but it was something like, if you're interested, please email and tell me why and something else. And if they didn't answer that question, I immediately thanked them and said, great, thanks for your interest, but I've hired someone. Because if I figured at the best moment of our relationship, which is the beginning when everyone's on best behavior, if they couldn't hear me or follow directions from me, that we would be a bad fit and pretty fast. So that's one of the things. I've done that even when hiring people, in jobs. But make sure that you like them and you screen them and, get references, and just like, in the corporate world.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Great advice. We do have time for some more, but maybe while we're waiting here, I've had a question about the presentation being available. And as I mentioned earlier, this webinar has been recorded, and the recording and the materials will be available on the fairfieldcounty.score.org website within the next couple of days, and you can just go onto that website and click on-demand webinars, and you'll see this one come up along with all of the other ones that we've had in the past. So again, if we do have about five or 6 minutes left here, if people have more questions, I know Belinda would be more than willing to take them for you.
Absolutely. Don't think anything's too small to ask.
Even if there are things that Belinda didn't touch on that are on your mind, I'm sure we could try those, or if you want her to go back to any of the particular slides or mistakes, we could go back for clarification too. So feel free to use the time, folks. We have another one from Bruce Paul. What are the biggest pitfalls or don'ts?
That's an easy one. It goes back to slide number 1, or the mistake.
Belinda, I believe I did not get the question out there. I didn't have the switch on, so I'm just going to repeat it. It's what are the biggest pitfalls or the don'ts?
Okay, that's all right. So it's one of the biggest ones is not taking yourself seriously. So, for example, one of my clients is a driving school, and they have handouts for the kids. And when I looked at the handouts, they were horrible. So here you've got something that is being downloaded. It's on dining room tables all over town, right? And there's no logo. There's no contact information. So it's really not being thoughtful about what you're putting out in the world and not realizing how much there's an impact. So that's why the first thing is the email address and the business cards. Anything you hand out, it's really important that it be terrific.
Okay, that's great. And one more. Do you think it is customer confusion if you do two different things like government contracting and nonprofit setup?
Yes. So the big thing here when you have your own business, because it's so much about referral and word of mouth, it's important for people to be able to say what you do clearly. So pick one that you want to do and talk about that. I know that it's hard. People struggle with this a lot. There are people out there, and I can recommend someone that can help with that, really niching down. But here's an example. I have a client. She was a coach, and there's a lot of business coaches out there. And this person that I'm talking about who helped her, Michael Katz, he realized that she had chronic illnesses. And so he said, well, do you like to coach people with chronic illness? And she said, yes. And so they had a conversation about it. Turns out he niched her down into being a chronic illness coach. And before you know it, she's on the cover of the Boston Globe. She's on the Today Show. So even though it seems scary to niche down, it's much better to do. You can still do the other work, but people you have to give them an easy way to know what you do.
We have one more. As a contractor always looking for the next gig, how do you communicate with your list without seeming needy all the time?
That's a really good question. And I say that there's nothing that turns people off more than neediness. It's just such a big turnoff. So there is no short play on this, and it depends on what your field is, but this can work across almost every field. Write a newsletter, keep in touch with people. If you notice in everything that I showed you that I put in front of people, there's no call to action. I know that's a big thing, call to action, but unless you're doing retail or something very specific where someone needs to click someplace, really what you want to do is wander through the world, keeping in touch with the people you know, and being a likable expert. If you can be a likable expert and confident, and even when I'm having a bad day, my clients don't know. I don't talk about my stuff. I'm there for them. So the more that you do that, the more you can be helpful, the more that you can really give yourself to the work, which is hopefully work you love, the more people will be attracted to you and the more work you'll have.
That's great. Totally agree with that answer as well. One last question. We have time for one more here. And the question is, what tool do you use for your client scheduling?
I use Acuity. I totally love it. I love it, love it, love it. It's great. Also, if all the resources I use are on my website, there's a tab called Resources, so most of them are there. Acuity is great. It syncs with Google. It syncs with a lot of things, but I use Gmail, so it syncs with that. You can sync across multiple calendars. The tech support are so nice. They send pictures of cats in their emails. You know, they're friendly, and it's just, I think, a few very nice people that support it, and they're lovely. So I've looked at all of them. There's Schedule Once, there's Calendly, there's I can't think of all of them right now, but that's the best one out there, and it's $10 a month.
Great, thank you. Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions today. Just one more reminder that the webinar has been recorded and the materials will be available in the next couple of days on our website. Reminder also of our next webinar 2 weeks from today on June 19th. And the topic is Grant Writing 101, Back to Basics, and with Raquel Burgo presenting. So on behalf of SCORE, I'd like to thank you all for attending today's live webinar, and we'd appreciate it if you could fill out your evaluations that will be sent to you. It really helps us a lot going forward. So in closing, a big thank you to Belinda for presenting today, and have a nice day, everyone.